TCI is brought to you by Spendthrift Farms Into Mischief, sire of multiple Grade 1 winner and leading 3-year-old Practical Joke. Best of luck to the connections in Kentucky Derby 143.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Triple Crown. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, we're 8 days away from the Kentucky Derby, and this time of year we start seeing attrition. You know, this is a grind on these horses to get ready for the Kentucky Derby. So we see horses that'll start falling off and maybe not making it into the starting gate. But based off of your first impressions today and the attrition that we know is coming, do you see any changes on TCI top 10?
Well, you mentioned the attrition coming, John. I do think there's some attrition coming. I mean, right now, that 20th horse is untrapped. I think it's very likely, in my opinion, just based on what I'm seeing, they're putting Royal Moe's number 3 on the list right now. I think he's probably going to get into the race when I start looking at the horse from California, Sonneteer and Royal Moe. But let's look at the TCI top 10 and talk about the shakeup here. We'll go over to our top 5, and those are going to stay pretty steady. I'm not comfortable with really moving any of those around yet until I see Irish Warcry, how he makes an appearance at Churchill Downs. And I thought the Champ Classic Empire has looked okay. He went out and breezed very early this morning, didn't get to catch that breeze live in person, but I'm anxious to see how he comes out of it. 3-horse, Always Dreaming. We'll talk about his work. Big work today. McCracken, you know, not a big horse, but has been steady. He's had good energy at Churchill Downs. Certainly shows that he likes that track like he did last fall. And Gunnevera is another interesting horse we'll talk about. And for me, Tapwrit moves in that top 6, John. I have a couple new horses in here, and I have a couple of horses off, as you'll see, and we'll discuss them. But Tapwrit moving in that 6th spot for me, I think that's an indication, something that we'll talk about, that this Derby is between 6 horses, in my opinion, and it's those 6.
Well, this morning I know Todd's got 5 horses that may get into the Kentucky Derby. All those horses breezed this morning. Of those horses, tell me, who did you think did the best this morning?
Well, we knew Malagasy was likely on the fence and out. I still think he's going to be out. May have already even been announced since we've been in studio, but I'm guessing he is out. You know, we thought coming in he'd have to work lights out to be in the Derby field. I think he'll be out. You know, so you really look at his other 4 horses, John, and Always Dreaming's the horse that is going to get the buzz. And really, it's sort of predictable. It's sort of like last year with Outwork, the Pletcher horse. He was the buzz 2-year-old all year long, the buzz 3-year-old as well in Florida for Ty Pletcher, so forward in the morning, just like Outwork was. So no surprise at all that he wows you with the stopwatch here. Big gallop out. But I'll say this, very eager going to the pole, and he's been very difficult to handle in his 3 days of appearances that we've seen at Churchill Downs, John. Getting very washy. Eager, tough to handle, jumping out of his skin. And when he broke off from the pole, I tell you what, he was the first one to go onto the track today to work. You could barely get position fast enough for him to backtrack from you know, the far turn and get right into his workout with Johnny V. Johnny V was wasting no time. They wanted to get him on and off the track fast. Very eager going to the pole, fighting his rider. Didn't really settle. I didn't feel like he looked settled and uncomfortable throughout, but he's a very fast, keen horse, big time gallop out. This horse is doing very well right now, but he's sharp as a tack. I mean, it looks like if you sneezed, he'd take off with the rider. I mean, he is sharp as a tack, and quite honestly, we'll talk about some of the other Pletcher horses, but from what I saw from the work today, I would almost think that Always Dreaming was a horse that I thought was going to be a stalking type horse. I think he's going to be like his sire. I think he's going to try to go wire to wire. Well,
I mean, his sire, he almost held on through incredible fractions. With as keen as this horse looks right now, it'd be interesting to see if they do put him on the lead. I mean, we'll talk about this more next week, but when you're out there on the lead in that Derby field and you hear those 20 horses or 19 horses behind you, it's an experience that no horse has ever had before. So even though they're keen, they can even go faster. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Always Dreaming. I want to talk about Tapwrit for a second, because he's a horse I see you've moved up the TCI top 10. You know, he was a horse that we were kind of, do we draw a line through that bluegrass? You know, what's going on with him? He worked really well in company today. Did you like the way he galloped out?
You know, you're talking about the mental aspect of the Derby, and Always Dreaming. Been in the serene settings of Palm Beach Downs, shipped into Tampa, shipped into Gulfstream a couple times. Well, now he's here at Churchill, and we're seeing him react. I expect him to get used to it, come around, be more professional next week. But it does make you wonder, the post-parade, the mental part of the Derby, how are they going to handle my old Kentucky home? You know, how's he going to handle that entire experience, the walk-up, the crowded paddock? You know, I'm a little concerned about Always Dreaming. I need to see him settle down, in my opinion. We talk about Tapwrit. He's another colt we've talked about this whole season in terms of being a big, slow mental developing type colt. I love him physically right now. I thought he looked as good as any of the horses that have been on the track or that I've seen at Churchill Downs. You can see why they paid $1 million for him. He really looks the part, John, and I really like the work today. Now, it's so interesting. You can't be at two places at the same time. I choose to be on the back stretch. I like to see the horses come out, enter the track. You get some time to really get around them there while they're waiting for the track to open up. And I like to position myself to catch the gallop out. So I have to go back and watch the video footage on the front side of how they actually work. I love the way this colt worked. I thought he could have at any moment put Patch away. Patch was working hard to keep up with him. And really, it almost looked like Tapwrit sort of lost interest at the wire. They had to refocus him for a gallop out again, mental development. But the way he gets over this track and the way he looks physically, John, I think he's now a big-time contender in the Kentucky Derby. He's showing me that he can run back to that Tampa Bay Derby. And look, nothing went right for him in the Bluegrass. So, again, from the start, nothing went right for him. So I'm willing to draw a line through that. To me, he's a player now based on the way he got over that track today.
All right, now I know you mentioned Classic Empire just a little bit there when we were talking about the TCI Top 10. Sent him out early. Were you able to see any footage of him, and how did you think? Was it just a maintenance work for him?
It was just a maintenance work. You know, I mean, they went, 49 and change, which that is really nothing for him. I think they were out in 102. Cassie seemed very pleased with the work. I mean, he ran 3 weeks ago. You weren't expecting to see any serious moves coming back in here. We know he likes Churchill and he gets over the track well. To me, how is he doing physically? How does he look? You know, I don't think he looks, you know, maybe I never got to see him in person last year, but just judging by video, to me, he doesn't look like he's quite as physically on top of his game maybe as last fall. Now, I can't really knock him for anything, but I'm very interested to see now him coming out of this work, how he continues to, you know, in the next week maybe develop, come out of the work. And again, I'm hoping he keeps having more good days than bad leading up to the Derby. Not that he's had a bad day, but to me, he's got to have some good days ahead for me to be encouraged, because I got him #1 right now, John, and this is way too tight of a year. I think he's the best horse. I think he's the most classy horse. But if he's not on top of his game, even though he likes his track, there's some pretty sharp horses right now that I think are right on his heels.
All right, I want to ask you about Gunnevera, because he's a horse that I've been concerned about his weight. We kind of talked about they're probably not going to push him too hard in his works. How did he look this morning? And, you know, tell me what kind of work did you think he had?
Well, if you look at final, this is why the workouts are very deceptive. You look at the final time, he worked 103 for 5/8. But he broke off the first furlong. I mean, he went 14 in the first furlong. And then basically he was 12 and change quarter, eighths of a mile from there on out. And this is never, you can see the horse has never really been a tremendous workhorse. In my opinion, when I look at Gunnevera, I like the way he gets over the track. I mean, he's probably got the longest stride in the field, John. This horse has legs for days. And when he really starts uncoiling them, to me, he has that look of a horse that can really make an impact down the stretch here, but he's pace reliant. And I think the most important thing in Gunnevera, though, wasn't the work. Honestly, I just wanted to see him be able to stretch his legs over the track and see how he got over the track. And I think I saw that. I mean, I like the way he got over this racetrack. In my opinion, it's the physical with him. This horse has been in training since last summer. It's good from an experience and battle-tested standpoint, but you wonder if he's over the top now. Was he peaking in the Fountain of Youth? And maybe the Florida Derby is an indication he's taken a step backwards. That's what everybody really wants to know. Gunnevera, to me, again, not having seen him as a 2-year-old, and only seeing pictures and hearing about him and watching video, to me, he's a tall, leggy colt. He's extremely narrow, and that's the way he is. He's never going to carry a lot of flesh. I'd like to see more weight on him, but just his mannerisms, a bright eye, to me, he's been very willing, and every day I've seen him go to the track. So I'm seeing positive things in there, but he's going to be a horse that I'll continue to monitor, particularly coming out of this work. And these final works, I think we put a little too much stock into how they do it. I think it's all on a case-by-case basis and what you're going to see. I knew, always dreaming, going to see something flashy because he ran 5 weeks ago. And I think they wanted to get that out of him. And he's a keen workhorse, just like Outwork last year. So don't put too much stock in these works. What I think is most important is how do they come out of these works the next few days? How do they look, and does it appear like they're trending up to a good race next Saturday?
All right, let's talk about the 2 new horses on the top 10, and that's Hence and then State of Honor. Did you see something that made you think, hey, let's get these guys on there, or was it more that you were concerned about Battalion Runner and maybe Gervin?
I mean, it's hard to be sold on Hence the way he ran, you know, in the Southwest. And Steve took him off that pass, and he looked like sort of a second-string colt that Steve said, okay, let's go to the Sunland Derby with, because that's Steve Asmussen's history. He won the Sunland Derby. At the time, I thought it was visually impressive, but he didn't beat a good field, right? Everybody says, well, it's a key race. IRAP was in there, and Conquest Mo Money, the runner-up in the Arkansas Derby. So the field's looking a little better now, but what I like about him is physically how he looks at Churchill Downs. I mean, he's carrying as good a condition to me as anybody that I've seen out there, and really both the Asmusens in particular. Untrapped, I thought, has looked fantastic too in Warrens. He's a very striking looking horse. But when I think of Hintz, John, to me, when I watched that work Monday, and again, it wasn't, Steve likes to work his horses heads up. Local Hero is a pretty nice speed horse that is touted as a very forward workhorse in the morning, broke off to his inside, and to me, Hintz looked like he could have taken him at any time as they were approached inside the 16th pole and on the gallop out. So I just like the work, the way he got over the track, and he could be a colt that just is blossoming right now. And when I look at him physically, again, there's question marks about this whole field, but I think I've seen enough to move him now into that top 10 because I've also been discouraged by other horses that are leaving the top 10.
All right, let's talk about Gervin real quick. I know that they said they've been pushing his work back, that he's got a quarter crack that he's dealing with. Tell me a little bit about it. Do you think he's going to make it into the gate or not? Yeah,
it's just such an unfortunate event, but look, no foot, no horse, right? It's the point of contact that you hit the racetrack, and it's the old adage, no foot, no horse. And look, Arrogate, we've seen good horses that they've managed bad feet with, had to run in bar shoes, but usually that's something that you manage over a course of time. The fact that this has sort of come up as a new thing now, so close to the Derby, John, you can't like it for Gervin. Be interested to see what that work's going to be like this weekend and whether or not he actually makes the field. To me, as you know, he was always a fringe player in our top 10, even though I like him at his future. So for me, with the foot injury, he has to come off now.
All right, well, is there any other horses you want to talk about before we go? Any more first impressions that you felt like the viewers need to know about before this weekend?
Well, I mentioned Gervin. Big chance he may be out. Malagasy, everybody knows he may be out. Didn't like the way Battalion Runner worked today, John. I mean, here's a colt that, look, they've been managing him all winter, and I've liked him. We've had him highly ranked, as high as third, I think, on our list, and I even thought he could move forward off of the wood. He'd been making good impressions all week in his training. I did not like him this morning. I thought his work was very poor. He's a forward, good workhorse. He worked with a workmate that could have easily taken him at any time and actually did take him at the wire. And Nick Bush was asking him for quite briskly to finish and gallop out with the workmate, and he was unable to do it. So makes you wonder about Battalion Runner, John. And I just think when you're in that camp right now, and Always Dreaming is so sharp, looks like a horse to me that is going to be on the lead in the Kentucky Derby, and it's the same ownership group, same trainer. This horse is not doing well. I would not be shocked at all to see Battalion Runner not running the Kentucky Derby and Always Dreaming taking that pace, that role of pace setter, trying to go wire to wire in the Kentucky Derby, because that's how sharp he is. And if I'm looking at other horses in here, now I mentioned Sonneteer and Royal Mo, I think both those horses will probably get into the field now, and I think it's probably because you're going to see defection from Gervin, Malagasy, Battalion Runner. And looking at Lee's going to get in my opinion, because cloud computing's out. So, I think that's going to be your field of 20, and I do think the California horses get in now.
All right, so that's the first impressions. We got some horses that are coming in. We got Thunder Snow. We got Irish Warcry possibly going to work. Irish Warcry going to work this weekend. So we have more first impressions that will be given next week for sure. But I know you're excited to see Irish Warcry this weekend.
Oh, extremely excited. And look, a couple other horses that have looked good. If you're a Practical Joke fan, you would like him. Now, when I look at Practical Joke, I see features of a horse that could be your 2018 Met Mile winner. I mean, to me, he's got that big hind quarter and Gaskin. He looks like a one-turn type horse, in my opinion. 7/8 to a mile type one-turn horse. He's so classy. They're putting blinkers on here, and they're just praying, I think, that the blinker is going to make him focus and finish that final 16th. I think it's the distance that gets him and not the blinkers. But you have to love the physical appearance that he is making. So if you think the blinkers will help him, and I think Chad's going to run him in blinkers, which could make him more of a pace presence too. Be interested to see how that affects him tactically in the race, because I think that's what you want in this Derby. You want to have some tactical ability, because we're seeing horses defect that are pace type presence. And when you're bringing in, looking at Lee, Sonneteer, Royal Mo has some tactical speed, but really he's not an extremely quick colt. Those are more closers than speed that are coming in and leaving the Kentucky Derby. So I think this is going to be a year that'll be very interesting. I'm interested to see how Irish Warcry works. Yeah. So it should be an interesting weekend, and we're obviously going to see the bulk of the field that isn't here come in Saturday, Sunday, and then the final arrivals will be Monday or Tuesday. And we should get a pretty good indication next week by the time the Derby show comes.
All right, thank you, Joel, and thank you guys for watching. Make sure you come back next week. We'll give you more impressions on these Derby horses, and we'll also give you our picks on who we think will win this year's Kentucky Derby.